Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense.
Yeah, you're tuned to Bay FM 99.9 here, your own and only radio station on the very tip of this island ship floating around in the ocean here on a fairly high degree of shutdown, as we know. And the updates in the news are running so thick and fast, it's pretty hard to keep up with. So we'll do our best to touch on a few issues here this morning on Future Sense. Yeah, so much going on here. So you're tuned to Future Sense, and in the studio with me this morning, my co-host again this week is Ross Hill. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning, Nick.
Nice to have you in here. It's a bit of company, a bit of safe company, because we hang out a bit and we
and distance,
because we do have some distance, and we also know each other well, so we know where we've been. Which, I think I know where you've been. I don't really know. We are going to be talking, I think, with a bit of luck, to our co-host, and my usual regular host of the show, of course, Steve McDonald, who is currently in Edinburgh in Scotland on his way home, if he can get home, which is a question. The increasing number of countries and borders that are closing up for one reason or another. What's the latest on that? Have you got some... how are we going?
There's a lot of... Yeah, I mean, aviation is typically down. There's some interesting charts online from Flight Radar 24 showing the before and after of, this time last year and this time at the moment. And there's just not many jets in the air. No. And, of course, when you park them, you've got to park them somewhere. So
that's right.
I saw a report that Avalon Airport are going to have 50, I believe, Qantas jets sitting there for a little while.
So that's Avalon down in Geelong. That's not a huge airport, of course. I've never been to Avalon, but it's a
not big.
significant
They do host the air show, though, so they can pack in those jets into the park there. Singapore announced that they're not accepting transit passengers into the country.
Yes. You can still transit through, but you can't get out.
Through, if the flights are still going. And Emirates announced they had a bit of a backflip, backflip as well.
A backflip and a backlog.
They cancelled everything, and then they uncancelled a few things.
That was interesting, wasn't it? And we thought about that with Steve, because we think that Steve is coming through Dubai, through the United Arab Emirates. So we thought, and for those who've travelled a lot and know that airport, that's a massive airport with a lot of traffic. So to close it down lock, stock and barrel was probably not a wise idea at this point.
Well, we'll see. And I guess we have to respond to feedback as it happens.
We do.
So things are going to be choppy a little bit till people figure out what's best for them.
And you heard a lot of the current news there on the news, on our local community news, and thanks to Mia Armitage and the team, as usual, for doing such a great job in this current situation where everything is moving that quickly. A couple of things about that, though. We've been asked and recommended, and just to remind particularly younger people, because as most of you know, in this last week or so, there's been quite a lot of talk about Bondi Beach being crowded with people the other day that was closed again straight after that. Other people, for example, local councillor Michael Lyon has pointed to the fact that Byron at night is still sort of thick in the streets with people. I don't think it's quite as it normally is by any stretch of the imagination, but it would seem that people maybe a bit younger than you, because you're a 30-ish something person, but that sort of age group, particularly I think in their 20s, not so much teenagers, because they're probably at school and they're probably getting a lot of information. Until tomorrow,
at least.
Well, that's right.
School holidays are starting, and so there's going to be everyone at home, I guess. And what better time to use the NBN than right now? There's a lot of video gaming happening.
If you have the NBN. That's the point too, isn't it? Because video gaming, and you also talk about a platform which I wasn't familiar with, Twitch.
Where
a lot of young people are finding community there via gaming, but also being used by other artists, possibly as a platform. Yeah,
there's heaps of options out there, and I think most people know about YouTube, which was the first big video website, and it was about videos that you record and then you publish and post and people can watch. But in the last 5 or so years, there's been a huge explosion of live streaming. So just like radio is live, you can obviously have live video online, but the distinction online is you can broadcast live to 5 people or 50,000 people. And so Twitch popped up as quite a popular website, especially with video gamers.
Yes.
So just like you might watch the footy on TV, you can also watch someone play the top video games online.
If that's what you're into.
If that's what you're into.
But you can also do things, as you're saying, with entertainers, because there's a lot of musicians who have gone online to give stuff to their fans, to do some live performances, other things, and it is a great opportunity in some ways to disseminate and to get that part of one's career actually motivated and moving even better than it was before, perhaps.
Yeah, and with so many cancelled gigs all around the world, it's kind of a perfect time to move online with some of those things. And some platforms also are more friendly to earning money than others. So with Twitch, for example, you can tip people. And so some of the professional streamers who are streaming every day actually make a good living by doing that.
There's other, which is a different kind of platform, things like Patreon.com, which is rather been around for a few years now, and supports artists in setting up their own pages and creating their own community there, and people pay sort of tithe of some sort or other towards them, and people are supplied with creative content all the time.
Yeah, and so there's a huge amount of different sites and different streamers and people doing things online. And in the media, we've heard a little bit about Netflix and some of these bigger centralized websites, but there's heaps of community sites as well, heaps of people streaming videos to each other. I've seen a barrage of emails from yoga studios moving online for this week.
Yes, that's happening a lot, indeed.
So there's heaps of things beyond just watching pre-recorded content. There's heaps of live stuff happening. And then, of course, working from home. There's a lot of conference calls and video meetings happening as well. But it shows the power of connecting with video, which is why we need such strong internet networks in the country.
And you mentioned to me off air this morning as we were talking about these issues that is there enough bandwidth? And some people are criticising things like Netflix, for example, and those other streaming platforms, which clearly if there's twice as many, 3 times as many, 5 times as many people using those platforms around the world at this time, it's going to create, or is it, a bit of a pressure there? So how do we deal with all that?
Yeah, we will see. I mean, the NBN have made a few changes on how they bill the internet providers. And I think that the real test will be in the next couple of weeks as people kind of exhaust the cleaning their cupboard or whatever, you just settle into the internet, and with school holidays as well, there's going to be a big boost in things. So there's already been some reports around the world of platforms like Steam, which is another popular gaming one. They hit 20 million people online all at once. And so I think we're going to see some of those records just get shattered as people do make the most of having the internet and using it, because that is one of the biggest differences with previous pandemics is we didn't have the internet. So in some respects we didn't know what was happening. If it was across the world, we usually wouldn't hear about it. Just a few decades ago. And so it's very different this time. Yeah,
very true. Yes, and also for those who aren't aware, our New South Wales Premier here in the state of New South Wales in Australia, Gladys Berejiklian, has just been doing a news conference and updating things, and some of those things include the fact that schools in this state in New South Wales are still open at the moment. However, about 30% of students are staying away, and she's actually saying if you want to keep your kids at home, keep them at home. So there's a change because there's no real agreement in Australia at this point about the closure of schools, is there? Different states doing different things, but they're not on the same page at this point, and a bit hard to know whether it's the right thing to do to close schools completely or keep them open, keep some jobs. It's a tricky situation.
It is tricky, but also, I mean, it is different in different places. So what works for Tasmania is maybe not going to work for New South Wales.
Very true.
So it is good, I think, to keep an open mind with different options for different places, and there's probably only going to be a few things that apply broadly to everyone in the country, and there's going to be a lot of local things that are quite different. And so it's been pretty cool to see in the Byron area, especially through Instagram. You can see so many local businesses starting to respond to things. Even last week, a lot of restaurants and cafes started doing takeaway orders and setting up the systems for that ahead of what's been announced today. And so there's a lot of good stuff happening there, so that we can still connect with local suppliers and local producers and support them, even if it does mean moving to home delivery. And I think a lot of independent businesses that I've been speaking to are pretty excited about that. It's not as if they didn't consider doing it before, but if you do look broadly at Australian online shopping, it's been a little reserved compared to what other countries across the world have been doing.
Yeah.
So, if you look at
we like to drive to our shops. We like to do that.
We do, but also we don't always rush to setting up websites. No. And so, for example, when Woolworths shut down their home delivery, it was just at the moment when people needed it most, especially people who couldn't get outside to do their own shopping. So I'm pretty excited about this burst in new shopping options, delivery options, and also just the range of it's not just the generic products that you can get, but you can get some of the local farmers' boxes and things that are popping up as well. So it's worth having a look out for some of your local favourites online to see if they do have special options at the moment.
Very good. Okay, you're tuned to Future Sense, and my special co-host guest, not the first time, is Ross Hill in the studio with me this morning. We are going to be hopefully talking to Steve McDonald, my normal co-host, of course, from Edinburgh in Scotland in about 15-20 minutes or so. See if we can get him on the line and talk about some of the big issues. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's no real particular theme. I think we're just looking at many of these pieces that are coming across our desks through our computers, the conversations that we're having with people out there in the world when you are out there and having conversations from 2 meters apart or wherever, because those conversations are still happening, and it's kind of essential too, I think, at this time that we actually have those conversations in person when you're actually out doing your shopping with those sort of social distancing parameters, and really get as much information and see where people are at. And because I think what's interesting to me is the tone of our response. What's the tone of the response generally? And of course, it's not one tone, but I think that's an interesting place, and we'll come back to that. It's an interesting point for me to think about. But if you want to join the conversation at any point, you can text in on 04373 4119, 04373 4119. That's a studio text line, and make any comment and bring our attention to anything that you wish to.
You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans.
Tune in FM on Future Sense here with Nick Jeans and special co-host this morning, Ross Hill, here in the lockdown of Bay FM, and we're certainly doing all the right things here, spraying everything, polishing everything, cleaning everything all the time, and we have only a skeleton staff and just a few presenters, and hopefully try to stay on air as long as we possibly can in this, and there is a possibility that media outlets may not be able to stay on air. We won't go into that area today, but it could get that serious. In fact, we even talked about the internet going down. You said that this morning, that possibility.
The usage is definitely
up.
The
usage is way up, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, for a lot of people in Australia, there's a big divide between those who have the fibre NBN, and does the fibre reach your house or just the curb, or are you still on copper? And there's a big disparity already. But I think it's a good test of, are we ready for this? And in many ways, you could have predicted 10 years ago that people would be doing a lot of online entertainment, online video, teleconferencing. There's all sorts of promises of the future. And yet here we are 10 years later. The network's kind of mostly finished, I guess, in some respects. But
it's a work in progress.
But here we are. We're using it. We're working from home. We're yogaing from home. We're online shopping from home. And so we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
There have been a few changes that have been made with the NBN responding to ISPs and asking for more data and seeing what the total capacity is. And I think it's probably almost too early to tell what, will there be enough internet for everyone? But you can see heaps of online gaming happening. And in Italy, there's been some interesting statistics around live stream viewers, which grew 66% since the first week of February when the quarantine began there. And so lots of video channels are growing in size, and the amount of different channels is also growing. So there's heaps of stuff out there to watch. And Telecom Italia announced that there's been an increase of more than 70% of the internet traffic over their landline network as well. And interestingly, they mostly attribute that to gaming.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Now, I mentioned the notion of the tone of our response, which I think is an interesting point, exactly how we're responding. And of course, the government's regulatory bodies, institutions and the like are responding the way that they feel that they need to, or as directed from government and so forth. So there's that. But on a personal level and a community level, what's the tone of our response? And we mentioned earlier, just to reiterate too, for those younger people who perhaps are thinking like they're safe and it's not a big deal and I'm still going to go to the beach and hang out with my friends in the pub. Well, there's no more pubs, clubs and the like going to be open after midday today anyway. Bondi Beach, as we said earlier, was closed the other day after it was full of people on Wednesday or Thursday last week, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever it was. So we do need to really self-reflect on what we are doing, and I think this is one of the big opportunities that we've got here. Who are we? Because people are hoarders. They're scrambling to get the last toilet paper. We've seen that crazy enough. Or maybe they're too laissez-faire, like some young people. Perhaps I don't want to just put it on young people. I'm sure there are other people who also have that attitude. The idea that we know what's going on, or we don't know what's going on, so why bother? These sort of things. What do we trust? Who do we trust?
What is essential?
And what is essential? And we'll talk a lot about that today, and also with Steve, when we'll get him on the line shortly. What is essential? And that changes continually. As you said, I think in a joking thing, Crown Casino was still essential until
a few days ago.
When the casinos are closed down.
And also what's essential, it changes. What's essential for 1 week, what's essential for 6 months, they're pretty different.
And I wonder whether people have really thought that through enough yet. I guess they're scrambling to do that sort of long-term projections and planning. Friends of ours have commented, and it's an interesting comment, that many of the essential services identified now, childcare, health services, food service, or even takeaway now, largely female-dominated in terms of roles. I mean, how do you see that? Is that the case, you think, that the essential services that have been identified at the moment actually are those kind of what usually underpaid services, teachers, nurses, and largely occupied, or certainly majority occupied by women in the workforce?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the specific breakdown of gender, but it is interesting that some of the financial remedies and programs so far have been targeted at casual workers and those different groups that have been probably laid off quickest from some of these jobs. And so it is interesting to see just how that affects people. And I think it's also almost too soon to tell. I mean, we'll just have to keep an eye on what's happening and listen to the feedback that comes in and go from there.
Yeah. Yes. So also, just who we're trusting, our sources that we're trusting.
There's a lot more experts around now.
There's a lot of experts. As I said to you jokingly yesterday when we shared a coffee at distance, an expert, someone once said to me years ago, an X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. And that's a bit silly. Yes, it is. But it does point to the fact that, how do you trust the expert? Whose expertise are you trusting just because they have a bunch of, credentials behind their name? Because we're getting a lot of different health information. I mean, it's kind of beginning to cohere into a fairly solid piece, I think.
Yeah.
After a lot of random sort of ideas about what's going on in a lot of different sources. That's not to say that some of the things that are being put out there on the fringes may have some truth to them at some point, but it doesn't really matter now, does it? Or does it?
There's such a big spread, and I think it really does depend who you talk to and who you listen to. A lot of us do want to hear the one right thing that we should be doing.
Yeah,
and does that come from the government or not? I think it's quite interesting that a lot of the people who I think previously haven't been seen as big government supporters in discussion as suddenly saying, like, you must listen to this particular government and their medical officer, which I was shocked at when I first heard some of these things. I'm like, are you talking about the same government as a few weeks ago? Because they haven't changed. And so, a lot of us do want the one right thing, the one right way, the list of 5 things we should do. And the World Health Organization today put out a list of the top 5 things for washing your hands and general cleanliness.
Yes.
But then there are different experts too. So we have
even with washing the hands,
medical officer in the country. We have one in each state.
Yes.
We have our local doctor. You have your own GP. You have your alternative, sources of information. There's heaps of different treatments, and I think there's no one right way that will meet every person's needs.
I mean,
it
throws us back into a sense of self-trust and figuring out one way or the other from your sources of information, or intuitively from your own truth inside what is the right thing for you to do.
And it may change day to day as well.
And it may change that, to be flexible within that, so that in fact everything rigid, we said this yesterday too, I think everything rigid is counterproductive. I mean, yes, there are rigid laws in place, and our Prime Minister just yesterday said we will give as many rules to you as we can and as many guidelines which they like. But we need you to think carefully about what you are doing and your behaviour and the impact it has on others. And that's a good statement, that second part. I mean, for many of us, the idea that they're going to give us as many rules as they can is a bit scary and frightening.
Yeah, and
to say the least.
How far do the rules go? Some interesting rules that were just passed in the parliament in Denmark about mandatory vaccinations, and they were passed quite quickly last week while the parliament was still open. But some of these ideas are very controversial. Also, internet metadata tracking, very controversial last year when the laws were going through, but they're here. What it does mean, though, is we could roll out contact tracing pretty quickly because the metadata is in a big pile.
Well, the Sydney Morning Herald just yesterday did a piece on that. We fear phone tracking, but it could be the help we need, that kind of technology.
And it's a great paradox.
Yeah.
In medical situations, some of these things are very useful, but they're also complex and they don't get any simpler just because there's a crisis.
Yeah, very true. So all of these pieces, folks, what do you think about that? What do you think about fear tracking? Did you see that piece about the notion that to track where people who may have the virus who've come in contact with one of the cruise ship people, for example, or you've travelled somewhere, and would you be willing to have your phone tracked or have that available to you so you know that people in your area have been or may be at risk, maybe carrying the virus? Is that a good thing? What do you think about that? Drop us a text, 043734 1119. Here on Bay FM, you're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Ross Hill. We'll be talking to Steve McDonald over there in Scotland fairly shortly.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.